In 2001, a group of French scientists went to Cyprus, and there they saw something very strange. There were more cats in this country than there used to be. Roughly speaking, through various estimates, they found out a lot. They discovered that there are about 1.5 million cats here, including the cats roaming the streets, on hunts, and the ones kept as pets. The cats in this country are everywhere, in every nook and cranny. It's surprising. What comes to mind is that Cyprus is an island in the Mediterranean Sea. Anyone who has raised a cat knows that cats aren't the type of animal that loves to bathe or swim in water. The closest mainland to this island is Turkey. It's about 70 kilometers from Turkey. So, did the cats swim those 70 kilometers to get here? No, that couldn't have happened. Then how did they get to this island? The answer to that was found by those French scientists. While excavating an ancient site in Cyprus, they discovered something very unusual. They found a burial site of a human from the past. The most special thing was that he wasn't buried alone. Alongside him was buried his pet, an 8-month-old cat. So, this cemetery, about 900 years old, shows us the oldest evidence of the friendship between humans and cats. It was about 4,000 years ago that cats started being revered in Egypt. So when exactly did this friendship begin? And who was the ancestor of the domestic cat? And how did humans help cats get to Cyprus and eventually spread across the entire world? Why did we start raising them? Let's talk about this through this video. All the domestic cats living among people today belong to the species Felis catus. As we trace their history, we find their common ancestor to be Felis sylvestris, this cat family. This cat family has 5 subspecies. When we examined the DNA of modern cats, we found that the animal most closely related to our cats is Felis sylvestris libica. This is a fact. These are the African wildcats still living in the African continent today. We call them African wildcats. If we compare them to our domestic cats, we can clearly see some big differences. The first is that they are larger than domestic cats. The second is that they don't have the beautiful colors our cats do. They have what we call a tabby pattern. We can find similar depictions of cats in ancient Egyptian art. Anyway, these cats live in solitude in the wild, not in packs like wolves. Because of this, scientists believe the way cats were domesticated is quite different from how other animals were tamed. However, to study this, we don't have enough fossils like those of the African wildcats from that time. Even though we have enough bones to gather genetic information, we don't have sufficient fossils to fully understand the various stages of their evolution. The oldest cat fossil in the world was found in Cyprus, dating back about 11,000 years. The next one, found in Turkey, is around 10,000 years old. So how did Felis sylvestris libica turn into the Felis catus we all know today? Well, just like the laziness of cats, all of this happened very slowly. Before we talk about this, we first need to look at why humans domesticated animals and how animals became domesticated by humans. What we call domestication is essentially a process where a wild animal is improved by humans and begins to live entirely under human control. They start depending on humans to sustain their lives. An American archaeologist named Melinda Zeder has found that humans domesticated animals in 3 ways. These 3 are the prey pathway, the directed pathway, and the commensal pathway. Don't worry, I'll explain all 3 to you. The first one, the prey pathway, refers to how people used to hunt these animals. But then humans realized that instead of hunting, they could raise herds of them nearby to reduce the effort of hunting. They forgot about hunting and could easily pick the best animal from the herd to eat without much trouble. Through these animals, humans bred different species. For example, from wild goats, they bred animals that produced more milk and more meat, creating tools to meet their needs. So, our ancestors modified wild animals to fulfill their requirements. That's what the directed pathway is, an intentional domestication process. Through this, we selectively bred wild horses, camels, and donkeys, adapting them to make our work easier. The next method of domestication is the commensal pathway. This is different from the previous two methods. Here, humans didn't go looking for the animals came to humans. We know dogs as an example of this. Back when they were wild wolves, they followed us around, eating the food we discarded. They became accustomed to us. Today, through the directed pathway, dogs have been domesticated and modified into different breeds for various purposes by humans. Scientists believe cats are also a species that came to us this way. For thousands of years, cats lived near human tents and houses, eating the food we threw away. But unlike dogs, they didn't become fully tamed by us, not even today. Cats are very opportunistic. They only hung around humans as long as they got some scraps of food. But humans noticed that cats were very good at catching mice and other animals that destroyed their food stores. So humans allowed cats to stay near them. We can learn a lot more about this by looking at the traits of ancient cats. About 5,600 years ago, scientists studying the isotopes in the bones of a cat that lived in northern China found that these cats had eaten millet. Millet was a staple food for humans at that time. Cats don't naturally eat millet, so how did traces of millet end up in their bodies? It happened because they ate the mice that came to eat the millet. Through those mice, millet entered their systems. Anyway, according to genetic information uncovered later, cats gradually got used to the food humans provided. Slowly, they forgot about catching mice and started relying directly on humans for food. Next, let's talk about how cat domestication happened and how it affected the wildcat. Due to domestication, wildcats became smaller. They also started developing various colors. At first, their tabby patterns began to change. Over time, they started getting black, white, and the familiar orange colors we know today. These colors are very recent developments. They became prominent because certain genes from wildcats stood out more. In relatively modern times, like the 19th century, humans even started creating new cat breeds through selective breeding. That's how the many cat breeds we have today were developed by humans. So, while cats were domesticated, they couldn't fully change their behavioral patterns or certain significant physical traits. We know that today, we can see dogs of all kinds around the world, completely different from one another, with various behavioral patterns. That's because we've been modifying them for different purposes since that time. But with cats, there hasn't been such significant modification. We didn't get the chance to change their wild traits. Even today, we can see the behavioral patterns of their ancestors in them. Sometimes, cats are born with traits very different from their parents, retaining the characteristics of their original wild ancestors. They can even mate with wildcats and produce offspring. You might not know this, but cats have been domesticated twice. The first time was in South Asia about 10,000 years ago. The second time was in Egypt about 4,000 years ago. We discovered this by comparing the genetic differences between Egyptian cats and Asian cats. Egyptian cats are much less evolved than our modern cats. In Egypt, at the Hierakonpolis site, we've found the remains of 2 cats and 4 kittens in 6 tombs. They died about 3,800 years ago. The bones of the pair are very similar to those of modern cats. One cat's bones even showed evidence of healed injuries, meaning humans had treated its wounds until it recovered. This is a good example that by that time, humans had already domesticated cats. As time went on, we started seeing paintings and excavations of cats in Egypt. We can see humans and cats living together. Scientists believe that in later times, the Greeks probably brought cats to Egypt. Then, about 2,000 years ago, when the Roman Empire began to expand, Cats spread along with humans. We learned that the Romans kept cats through these paintings. We see images of cats hunting, and they likely used them to protect their stores and control mice. But all these stories don't tell us one thing. Where and when exactly did cat domestication begin? The oldest evidence comes from an island like Cyprus. So who brought cats to Cyprus? Scientists hypothesize that during the early Holocene period, about 11,000 years ago, Asian humans migrating to Europe brought cats with them. From the few that arrived in Cyprus, a massive population has grown today. Now, they've become a problem for the country. You know how fast cats reproduce, right? That's how they've spread across the world like wildfire. Today, there are roughly 600 million cats worldwide. It makes you wonder, did cats use humans to conquer the world? When you hear things like this, it's clear that without humans, they wouldn't have left Africa or Asia. So, if they used us to spread across the globe, shouldn't they respect us instead of acting so aloof?